So what is temperament? We keep talking about temperament testing, but what really is temperament? Is it a behavior? Is it the character of the animal? What is everybody calling temperament? And even what are people calling personality? A lot of researchers are actually using these terms interchangeably, and so you can imagine this makes things oftentimes very confusing and leads to a lot of inconsistency. When Diedrich and Giffroy were doing a review of the studies that were looking at temperament-based traits, they actually found that one researcher in a study had actually used the word temperament to describe an actual temperament trait that they were trying to evaluate. And can you imagine how hard that paper was to read? And so Sheila Segerson took it upon herself to try to define some of these terms so it's a little more clear exactly what people are trying to talk about. And so she started with character, and what she defined it was as the product of the animal's environment and experiences. It's something that the behaviors are the animal's habits of responding to a situation, so what is typically used to do, and that can actually change due to the environment. And it's actually, if you look at how she described it as developed secondary to experiences, you can consider that a learning history. So an animal may have been in the situation before and learned this certain reaction, got a response, and therefore it's more likely to do that again. And then she looked at temperament, and again, this is very similar to how she defined character, is that it's a pet's natural or innate response to an emotion. It's the environment, and it potentially has an emotional component versus learning. It's considered stable over time, so that's very important when you're looking at the definitions. And it's also considered the foundation of what people are calling personality. Also important to note that character may be able to change it or influence it, but it cannot change it. So it's supposed to be something that's with the animal long term. Then you move on to personality, and of course that's a little bit more of an anthropomorphic term that we're applying to our animals. And she's describing it as a combination of both temperament and character put together. It's the animal's overall way of responding to the environment, so it's learning history coupled with its emotional experiences. And it's based on past experience, which makes sense if you're looking at what character is, and it's also its genetic tendencies, so that's certainly something that's going to be fairly stable. And regardless, when they were looking at these papers, regardless of what term the researcher decided to use to describe their traits, some certain things were stable throughout those papers, if you will. Everybody assumed that these traits that they were looking at are going to be present at an early age, they're going to be relatively stable over time, and that they would expect that the same response they pick up at that point in time is going to be the same response that's going to be elicited in a similar situation in the future. And again, these are all assumptions that people are making. They also assumed, along with the previous slide, that these traits that they're looking at are going to be influenced by things like genetics, the prenatal environment, so whether that puppy was next to a male or female littermate in the womb. What was the mother-offspring relationship? Was it a very nurturing mother, or was it an animal that was taken away from a parent or for whatever reason? What were the early experiences during the developmental periods for that puppy or kitten? And then the learning capabilities of this animal. Is this a very smart, trainable animal who is highly motivated to manipulate its environment, or is it one that's less inclined to do so?